Jamie was a little shocked, to say the least. The last he had seen of this man, he was on death's door. Now he was demanding coffee in a room that Jamie had no idea how he'd gotten to, and acting like nothing had happened. Crud. Fine. I'll make it, grumbled Reggie as he slowly stood up, groaning, and moved gingerly towards a machine that Jamie had never seen before, and seeing his wide eyes explained, "Suppose you never seen one of these. It's a universal fountain. Anything water-based, it'll make it, or at least a close approximation of it. You gotta ask it specifically to add caffeine, otherwise it gives you decaff sludge," he said, his face scrunching in disgust. Jamie slowly began to take in his room, calming down as he identified things that he could recognize, and began to move to the table, perching on the chair, still not at ease in Reggie's presence. The walls were the same bluish silver metal as the rest of the ship, but there were small touches here and there to make it habitable. There were small shelves built into the wall next to the strangely ovoid-shaped bed. The table and chairs were plain but functional and comfortable, and cupboards either side of the door Jamie supposed was probably a washroom of some kind. He noticed that everything large seemed to have buttons on a screen, with characters in a language he couldn't understand. Reggie returned with 2 cups of coffee from the machine and, noticing Jamie's interest in the screens, "Therefore changing the shape to suit the species," he said, groaning, as he sat opposite Jamie, sipping his coffee and sighing with the same tone that you'd expect from someone who hadn't had a drop of water in 3 weeks, suddenly drinking a mug of pure glacier water. "Here, watch this," he said, as he leaned over and used the slider bar to shuffle through the characters on the screen on the bed, until the characters changed to silhouettes, then pressed the largest button. The look on Jamie's face must have been priceless, as the bed immediately began to shift and ripple, the bed widening and lowering into a flat mat on the floor barely 2 inches thick, seemingly made of a spongy material. "That's the bed those wrinkly Thalians prefer," he said, laughing as Jamie's mouth hung agape. Jamie stood up and stretched out a hand to test the new bed, his hand immediately hitting the floor as he applied pressure. "I can't sleep on this," he said, still clearly amazed, but now with a hint of concern in his voice, as he looked at the screen and replicated the movement that Reggie had done until he found an approximate likeness of human proportions, then pressed the big button, jumping back to observe the bed, rippling and shifting once more until it resembled something more akin to a giant beanbag. "This is standard now?" he said, looking at Reggie, who just chuckled and gestured to Jamie's coffee, inviting him to sit. "Not quite. You're an honored guest now, so you get the good stuff," Reggie replied, sipping his coffee once more, savoring the rich, earthy flavor. "You got any idea what we just did?" Jamie merely shook his head as he sipped the hot coffee. "Well, let me tell you, everyone here is safe now, 'cause of us. We took out a monster. Done it loads of times," replied Jamie, eyeing Reggie, noting the new scars up his neck. "The thing had nearly killed him, and here we are sitting in a room having a coffee. This is insane," thought Jamie. "Well, I'll clue you in. What we just took care of was a sarlin like all the rest you've seen here, but infected with a dangerous parasite," said Reggie, chuckling as Jamie's eyes widened and he checked himself. "It don't affect us. It's something that only affects Dracorlics and sarlins for some reason. Apparently it's the aluminium content of them. Sarlins that are infected go insane and eventually become tough as nails to kill, whereas Dracorlics have more of a symbiotic relationship with it. But the result is the same to a degree. They both need aluminium to create their inner structures. Bones to you and I." Jamie sat, brow furrowed, as he thought back to the fight, remembering how the creature seemed to have a mouthful of metal even as it was fighting the two of them. "That's why it ate the blasters," he mused aloud, his face framed by his long, lank hair, concentration written all over it. "I thought it was just smart, getting rid of the danger. Unfortunately not. They just eat any and all aluminium they can. It rapidly replaces their inner plates and becomes their teeth as they regress through their evolution," said the old medic forlornly. "That one was what used to be our captain. Was hoping I could get to him in time. Must have gotten infected with it a while ago, though, as by the time I got to the bridge, the turn had almost taken place completely. We were lucky he hadn't had a few more hours chewing on stuff," he said, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. Jamie sat there, the news of this not really settling on him at all. He wasn't sure if he should feel bad. He'd never met the guy, and last he'd known of it, his kind were his sworn enemies. He settled on the fact that he'd taken care of a monster. It was simpler, and Jamie liked it simple. Now, I was hoping you'd say a bit more, maybe have some questions for me? Feel like I'm rambling on here, said Reggie, with a raised eyebrow. He had to get through. He needed Jamie to be, at the very least, on board with him for his plan to work. Is Ju-Oot okay? Said Jamie finally, his demeanor hard to read. She's fine, very busy for the moment, but fine. As are the rest of the folks on the ship, to be honest, fixing the damage we caused and making her space-worthy again, shrugged Reggie with a warm smile. But all alive thanks to the two of us. Jamie nodded, glad to hear that she was okay. You mentioned Drakerlex. What are they exactly? He asked, his brow furrowing once more. Drakerlex, corrected Reggie offhandedly. Was wondering if you'd ask about that. Why don't I show you instead? My friend Dorian would love to pop by, but they are quite fragile, so I'd have to ask you not to touch them. Does that sound good? Said Reggie, with an almost parent-like tone in his voice. He seemed to be enjoying chatting with Jamie like this. Don't stress, he's friendly and a decent guy besides that. Jamie grew slightly tense, but resolutely nodded and replied, Fine. Where? Well, he can be here in a couple of minutes if I call him, or you want to clean up a bit first? Said Reggie, eyeing Jamie's unkempt hair and long beard. Plenty of cleaning stuff in the bathroom, and I've seen my fair share of bunk rooms to not be intimidated by another man's nakedness. He laughed jovially. Wash, please, said Jamie, the me-rest hint of shyness creeping into his voice. Or was he ashamed? Could you help me? Jamie suddenly didn't look like a 6-foot-tall, muscular gorilla of a man. He looked like a man who is lost. Reggie couldn't do anything but nod and help, saying nothing, realizing that this was a huge step towards Jamie trusting him. Once they had cleaned Jamie's hair and beard, and he had had a shower, he looked like a new man. There are probably a couple of different styles of clothes in that cupboard over there, son. Find something you like, said Reggie, studying his mostly empty cup of coffee as Jamie changed, smiling internally at the small victory. Jamie turned finally and said, Not sure they fit. As Reggie looked up, he couldn't help but burst into laughter at the sight that greeted him. Jamie stood there, 250 pounds of angry, muscular, man-wet hair framing his rugged face, his wet, bushy beard still slightly damp and shining in the light, with what could only be described as shorts that looked as though they were attempting to choke the life out of Jamie's buttocks and thighs, and a crop top that barely covered his hairy belly button. Very funny new clothes, please, said Jamie as the seams began to rip on cue, prompting more guffaws from Reggie. Sorry, bud, but that was incredible, said Reggie, tears streaming from his eyes as he stood up to help Jamie program the cupboard. A couple of minutes later, Jamie had picked out a loose-fitting shirt and shorts with a belt, and Reggie had even managed to source a code for a scabbard that would fit Jamie's knife, assuming they could get it back. Right then, I'll call Dorian, said Reggie, to a stern nod from Jamie.